So welcome, everyone. So glad that you could join us this morning. This is inspired by her story, and I have a guest with me today, Tricia Jordan, all the way from California. So good to see you, Tricia. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I hope you've got some coffee. We're just going to sit back and have a conversation and just, hear your story. So how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? Having a
I'm
good day
good.
so far? Good.
Yeah, I'm good. It's summer. It's trying to sunshine, and yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. Awesome.
So Tricia, you shared a bit about your story with me earlier, and it is very inspiring. I know the listeners are going to be encouraged. So, um, did you want to start with your childhood growing up, or?
Yeah, I'll fill in a little bit about me and then I'll go into from there. So
Yeah.
I was born in Georgia and I'm the baby of five. I was an baby. So my mom and dad had a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old when I was born. Um,
It's a fairly big
my
family.
It is, yeah. And my 18-year-old sister had two children when I was born. So she had a 2-year-old that was 2 weeks old. I mean, a 2-year-old that her birthday was like a week after mine, and then she had
Okay.
another little girl that she was born 3 weeks before me.
Okay. So you
So
grew
we
up with
were,
your nieces.
I did, yeah. So, and then I had a nephew. My older brother had his son when I was 18 months old. So
Okay.
that's who I grew up with, were my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. It was fun. We had a good time.
So did they call
And
you
then
Auntie Tricia?
no, not at all. I think I was more like your cousin, instead of an aunt.
Yeah.
So
But did you go to school together?
we did a little, yeah, some. They didn't always live like in the same area that I was
Okay.
in. But yeah, we did go to school together, maybe like in elementary for just a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then as they
That's
got
fun.
older, yeah, my sister moved and my nephew never lived like near me. So he lived like 15, 20 minutes from me. So,
Okay.
um,
Okay. And so your parents had a corner store? Your
yeah, so my dad had a store. It was like like a local grocery store. It's kind of small. Um, and he had, like, I mean, just, it wasn't like a convenience store. It's like a small grocery store. So in the
Okay.
back, he had meat. So he had like some of the best meat in town, and people would come just to get his meat because it was so fresh and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So it's kind of a neat little store. But there's one here in Burbank that I shop at now, and I love it because every time I walk in, it reminds me of
Oh,
his store. So
yeah.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So but yeah, so he had the store, and my brother, at this point he was 10 years old. Um, he would help my dad in the store, and on the weekends or whatever for fun, kind of. It was neat. Like it was fun. It was a fun thing to do back then.
Well, it would have
This was in
taught
this.
you a lot about business too.
Oh yeah, it definitely
And and
did.
you and you'd learn a lot about people. So
Yeah,
there'd
you
be
definitely
some advantages to having a family store. Yeah.
right. It was in 1970, in the 70s when my dad had the store. And so it was like right after Christmas. It was in January, and my dad and my brother were in the stores this Saturday, and they were locking up. And my dad always would carry would at night when he got ready to lock up, he would get his gun and carry it around with him, and to lock up the store. And so this particular night, he did not do that. And when he came back up to the front of the store, my brother was standing behind the register, and this guy came in, and he had a Molotov cocktail, which is a bomb that was in like a glass jar. He had it in his hand, and he was just trying to rob the store. Is all he was trying to do. But my dad instantly said to my brother, like, "Throw me my gun." And when he did, the guy threw the bomb on my dad and hit him right like in his stomach area, and it exploded and it caught him on fire. It burned him 65% of his body, third-degree burns. Of course, it caught the store on fire, and my brother ended up catching on fire. Also, his leg did, And one of the things I talk about in the book, and this is from my memories, this is from my family talking to me. So their memories are going to probably be so different, you know what I'm saying? But um, my dad had a cooler in the back of the store that had just started leaking, and he had not got it fixed yet. It wasn't like a huge leak, but it was, leak enough. And at that point, I think my brother had said he heard my dad say, "Go roll in that water, go roll it," which my dad obviously did not say that. I can't imagine he said that if he's on fire. I think it was just the Holy Spirit that was taking care of my brother at that moment. And so he went and rolled and got his leg out, put out. And then there were some people riding by the store that saw that it was on fire. And they stopped and started getting water hoses and, calling 911 and trying to get like my dad put out and that kind of
Get some
stuff.
help.
Yeah. And so, of course, they were trying to bust out windows to help him, get the fire out, just whatever they could do to try to help out. And they got him to the ER. And in his whole story, like the whole thing about it is all a miracle. Number one, he survived. When they got him to the ER, we did not have a doctor on, like at that time, like that particular night. The doctor on duty was not really equipped for this. And so he started doing some crazy stuff, and my mom had to go in and go by court order and get a different doctor. Well, the cool thing, and I talk about this in my book, the cool thing is that doctor had not been in Georgia too long in our town, but he was from the Augusta Burn Center, one of the top burn centers.
That's amazing.
And yeah, and I talk about how, God knew, like he knows, and he sets up stuff, and he does stuff for us ahead of time that we don't even see. And so he knew that my dad and my brother were going to need him, and he
Yep.
sent him to our town beforehand. And so we were able to get him on the case, and he pretty much, like, he saved my brother's leg, he saved my dad's life. He was phenomenal. He was like, we of course have that ultra, so much respect for him because of how he handled and what he did. And I just think it's neat. I think it's cool when you sit back and you look at when you go through things that if you can see it where God has other things lined up for you in the process. You
And
know?
that's an amazing example of how he goes before us and prepares the way,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know, because
It
he's the same
is.
God yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He knew that would happen. And so
Right.
he was already there.
Right. He was.
Wow.
So yeah.
So
And
your dad
another
survived.
he did. He survived. He was burned third degree. He lost of course feeling, so he couldn't feel stuff. He had to teach himself to like pick up a cup or pick up, to eat or whatever. So he was disabled, from then on. On one hand, he lost two fingers. On another hand, he lost one. So he had that disability also, on top of it. And he was awesome though. Like even though he went through this, he came through it. He, still lived his life like as strong as you could live under those circumstances. Obviously he had damage like in his lungs and different things for breathing. He had to do inhalers and stuff. But he was a great father. Like he was awesome. And for me, the way I look at it is like my parents were great parents. Period. From the time they started having kids at 20 and had us all the way to 40, they were devoted to us. Period. But for me, I got to spend that extra time with my dad where he wasn't working. And so he was with, what I'm saying? Like I had extra like one-on-one time that
You
was
you were
important because
you were 4 when this happened.
yes, I was 4 when it
Yeah.
happened. And so I got to have that extra time with him, like where he would get up and take me to school in the morning, or the different things that he was able to do that you know, he may have been able to do with my other brothers and sisters. I didn't see them grow up. But you know what I'm saying? Like for me, it was just kind of
Yeah.
some special times. We traveled every summer to New Mexico. My aunt and uncle lived there, and he could breathe there in the summer. So we would go stay for a month. And
Okay.
so we got to travel. We got to travel. We got to travel the West. We got to do some fun stuff, um, that even though my family's always traveled, was never to that extent. You know what I mean? So But my mom sold real estate so she could go. So it wasn't hard for her to, to leave, and she could still have stuff working back in Georgia. So
So
it
was
was
your
kind of
dad able
neat.
to work after that?
No, he was not. Yeah. He was totally disabled after that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
How one
yeah.
person's decision can make such a huge impact on a family.
Oh, yeah, it can. I remember one day my dad picked me up from school, and we were riding. He had a truck, a little small, like S10 truck, and we were riding in it. And he made a comment to me. He said, after everything that we went through, because our family went through hell and back from that, in many ways, just just even my brother, like what he's been through his whole life because of that, because that's stuff you don't forget. Like
Mhm.
that's a trauma you don't forget. You just have to
That's
have
right.
the Holy Spirit to work, to work with you through it. But I remember
Yeah.
my dad telling me one day, he was like, after all of this, he's like, I have forgiven that guy. He told me, he's like, I forgave him. And that was a big lesson for me on forgiving, because I was still young. My dad passed when I was 12. He had a heart attack and passed when I was 12. And
Okay.
so, I was probably 10 when he told me that. So that was a big impact on me to learn to forgive, to go, man, if you can go through that and it impact your whole life the way it's impacted your life, and you can still go, okay, and that comes through the Holy Spirit, that comes through God. I mean, my dad was, I would get up in the mornings and walk into our kitchen, and he was in there reading his word, I'm saying, like he was always like reading his word, and um, he was just a devout Christian. And so it was neat to see him teach me that about forgiveness.
Well, that's an incredible lesson. What about your mom? How did she deal with that?
Um, Gosh, my mom is so strong. Like she's one of the strongest women I've had I've ever known. You know what I'm
Because
saying?
that would have been tough. There was a quite a few kids in your family, and
Yeah,
she would have been used to, like, I'm assuming, was working in the store with your dad.
yeah, she did. What she ended up doing when I was 6, she got her real estate license and started doing real estate, and so
That's a
that gave
big
her the
life change. Yeah, that's a huge life
yeah.
change for her.
And it gave her flexibility to be where she needed to be. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
it opened that door. She ended up doing the real estate until she was 78. So from like
Wow.
46 to 78, she sold real estate and loved every moment of it. So
Good for her.
yeah, she's such a people person. But my mom was such a woman of God. Like she was so strong. She was, what I remember, even up until honestly till her last days, is you would walk in and she'd be on the floor praying like for hours. And she was just such a, you know, a, I hate to say a force, but a force. You know what I'm saying? Like her,
Yeah,
yeah,
powerhouse.
like yeah, she was. And so, and because she was so strong, I think it made like a huge difference. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, in in those areas, like it was like so because of that I'm sorry, I'm kind of like she was such a strong person though, and she was able to forgive. My mom was really good about that too, you know what I mean, like, but she had been through a lot in her childhood too, so I think that made a big difference. So when my
Just
mom got saved,
a
I'm sorry,
strong
when my mom
upbringing.
got saved, she got saved, she was like 16, and she would tell us all the time, she would say, I didn't just get saved, I fell in love with Jesus. And she
Oh,
walked that every day, every day. So
yeah,
yeah. Sorry, I didn't
that's
mean to talk over you.
no, that's good. I love that. That actually, I just heard that the other day, how when we're like trying to walk with Jesus and trying to be close to him, sometimes if we just allow ourselves to let him love us, then then we'll fall in love with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when we let him love us, we're going to see what he's doing for us.
Right,
And then we can see him when we're looking for him.
right. It's so
Yeah,
true.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So what was next then? Um, something
So
happened when you were 12, 14?
yeah, so my dad passed when I was 12. He
Oh,
had a heart attack, and he had just dropped me off at school. It's the first day of my seventh grade year, and we were running behind, and so he dropped me off, and I got to the door, and I was always, because of what I had been through, I always would like give my parents a hug, a big goodbye kiss, tell them I love them, and let them go. And that day, I just ran out of the car and I got to the front door and I was like, oh, I forgot to tell him, and I turned around and he was driving off.
oh,
When he left there, he had a dog named Shane, a little poodle, and Shane would sleep with him. He was with my dad everywhere. He was like his protector. And so he would always ride to school with us. And they were going not too far from our house. We had a place called a Golden Gallon. You'd go get, like, they had the best milk, little store, little gas station, but they had great milk. So he was going there to get milk, and he went cardiac arrest, and he wrecked his truck, and he ended up in the hospital in ICU for several weeks, and then he ended up passing in September, so like a few weeks later, and so I
yeah.
was 12.
Okay.
So,
That would have had a big impact on your family too then.
oh yeah, it was huge. It was huge. That one took me a little bit longer to get over. I think I was so angry. I was
Mhm.
pretty mad. So
Well,
sorry.
daddy's girl. So,
Yeah.
he's driving you to school every day. You had all that one-on-one time with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something about losing our parents, isn't there?
It's so hard. It is. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So
So,
so tell me about Martin Luther King Day.
so it was January the 15th of 1990. Um, I had my two nieces that I grew up with. We were 18 and 20 at the time.
So
And
these are the girls that could have called you Auntie Tricia, but they're your
yeah,
cousins. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
You're
my
the same
nieces.
age. So these are the girls. Okay. And you're
Yeah,
how old?
18 and 20. We were 18 and
Okay.
20. So Tyra and I were 18 and Tracy was 20. And they had an apartment on their own. They both had some newborn babies. Tyra had a 3.5-month-old little girl. Her name was Destiny. She was so cute. And then Tracy had a son. He was 5 months old and is adorable. Like, he's grown up to be such a handsome young man. He's in his 30s now. So it's so funny saying that. Um, but
Yeah.
anyway, they actually lived close to where I cut hair, so I would go by and like trim the baby's nails and little things like that they couldn't. They weren't like great, they were uncomfortable doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on this particular day, I was supposed to meet them at my sister's house and do her hair. I was going to give a hairdresser. I've been a hairdresser for like 34 years, so I was going to give Tracy a perm and cut Tara's hair. And that morning, I didn't hear from them. And so I wasn't that worried about it. I just figured they would call me. It was still kind of
Yeah.
early. Um,
Maybe sleeping in or
and
something.
yeah. And so I got a phone call from their aunt on their dad's side. And she was like, Tricia, so have you heard about the girls? And I'm like, what are you talking about? What about, no, I haven't. What are you talking about? And I'm in, like, in your head, you can't even like rationalize what she's about to say. And she was like, Tricia, both of the girls and one of the babies have been killed. And I was like, immediately you think car wreck. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're
Yeah.
thinking like car wreck,
Yeah.
or, you're not thinking something else. And I was like, what? Like, what happened? Like, what do you mean? And she was like, Tricia, they were murdered. And you feel like your whole world is like just spinning out of control at that moment. I was watching my two nephews. They were, I'm trying to think, like 3, I guess, or so at the time, and I had both of them. Um, and so then at this point, I'm getting off the phone with her, trying to get a hold of my family, so we can like find out what's going on. And so what had happened in that process, they had found their dad, but they had not got to my sister yet, and she was at work. And so they were having to get to her personally to tell her, not call her, you know, so it was like she was further away. And so we immediately headed down to meet her at her house, and one of her coworkers brought her home. And I talk about this in my book, but sorry, seeing her get out of the car, and she just fell in my mom's arms. And every time I talk about it, I cry. I just do. It's such a, just thinking about that is so heartbreaking. Just to be a mom and be at that moment. So I just remember her almost on the ground there, and it was so heartbreaking. And so as we went, we found out that one of the youngest one, Tara's boyfriend, they were broke up. So it was her ex-boyfriend. He came over to the apartment, and he went in to talk to her, and she was in the back. She was in her bedroom with the baby. The baby was still asleep, and they started fighting. And so Tracy, the oldest sister, she went to the back to see what was going on to the bedroom, and he pulled out a gun. And at that point, he shot Tara and Tracy and the baby. And he had written a note to the girl he was with at the time. She had called, but he had said no, he wasn't going to do it. But she didn't tell anybody. Like, she didn't give a warning or anything. And so one of the other guys that was there at the time, he had the oldest baby. He had him in another room, and he hid with him in the closet. He did try to come out, and he tried to shoot at him also. And so he hid with him and kind of protected the baby and called 911. You know, for us as a family, for what we just went through, I hate to say that, but thankfully the guy went to his car and took care of himself. Now, as a Christian and the person I am, because of that, I always prayed. I was like, God, I hope that somewhere in there he asks for forgiveness. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I do. That's sincere. Mm-hmm. Like, I really did hope that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, no matter what, you don't want people going to hell. Unfortunately, it's happening, but you don't want it. And so, because I had that, I never had like total hatred towards him, or I never had to deal with that part of it. I just had to deal with the grief of losing them. And it was hard. I'll be honest with you, Linda. It was hard. I remember.
I cannot imagine this.
I remember riding down the road one day, and the pain was so bad. I was headed to work, and I lived in Cartersville. I drove into like Atlanta, so it's like a 40-mile drive, and the pain was so bad. And I've never been like a person who was like, oh, I would commit suicide, or I would, you know, I've never been that. Not through anything I've been through. But there was 1 second one day, and I know that was the enemy, but there was 1 second one day, the pain was so strong. I was like, if I wrecked my car and it took me out, nobody would ever know, and I would not hurt anymore, because it hurt so bad. You know?
That is part of grief, Tricia, because people will drive recklessly or do something reckless. Just we cope with what we know how to do. Sometimes it's drinking, sometimes it's shopping therapy. Sometimes it's just binge watching TV, just something to escape. So like all kinds of grief mechanisms that can just kick into place.
Right.
Yeah.
And immediately the Holy Spirit, of course, is like, oh, absolutely not. You know, I mean, because, you know, let's be honest with you, like that whole day could have been different. What if I would have been at my sister's and he would have came there? Do you know what I'm saying? Like everything could have been different, like that whole day for me. And in the end, God still spared me and, you know, protected me from that. And so it's like there's all these different things that go through your mind constantly with it. But God's grace that's where you see God's grace when you go through stuff like that. That's where you see God's peace. I remember the funeral home was packed, of course, because we knew everybody in our town, you know, they're young, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Um, my family and is a big family, and so my parents have been in business several different times, just different things. We're involved in our churches and all kind of stuff, and so um, I remember the day of the funeral, we were riding, and we had, of course, we're in the limos following the hearses, and I remember riding, watching, and I'm just bawling, like I'm just crying and crying as we're following them because there's two going down the road, like you're following two down the road, and you're just sitting here going, this is unbelievable, like this should not be happening right now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we got to this one part on the road, and I remember it. Like I remember where I was at on the road. I remember everything, and this peace hit me. And it talks about it in the Bible. It's the peace that surpasses all understanding.
Yeah.
That peace hit me. Now, when I say that, people are like, "Oh, so you weren't upset?" No, I was still upset. Like I still cried, but I had inner peace. I had like deep peace down in my soul. That in the midst of all this, God was still in control.
Yeah.
That God still knew what was, he knew it was coming. He knew what was going on, and that he was there, period. And that doesn't mean I didn't grieve. Like I said afterwards, riding on the road that day, you still go through emotions, but it's just different when you have God's peace to get you through it all.
It is.
It makes a difference.
Tricia, you have been through so much. I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with all this. But you do know that God was with you, and that has protected you. His hand has protected you. So what would be the lesson that you've learned through all this?
Well, the one thing for me is I've learned that it rains on the just and the unjust. Like it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or you're not a Christian. You're going to go through things in life. But the biggest difference is having Christ there to get you through it, and to know that He is with you, He is beside you, and that He is your confidant, He is your comforter, that He loves you, that He's got His arms wrapped around you, and that He is the only person that can get you through it. Like you can't get through stuff like this on your own. You might think you can, but you can't. Like you have to have the most people, unless I tell them my story, most people don't even have a clue I've been through what I've been through. Like they would not have a clue. And I've had several other interviews, and the people would be like, you can't tell you've been through this. Like when we're talking to, you can't tell. And I'm like, that's the Holy Spirit. That's God. That's not me. That's God, And so for me, that's it. Just learning to rely on Him. I mean, I think I talked about this with you the other day, Linda, but I rely on Him for everything. Like literally, if I pull into a parking lot, He may not open the door, and I may still have to park, 3 blocks away, and that's fine. But I still say to Him, hey, Lord, I would love for you to open up a parking spot nearby if possible, or if I'm in a hurry, or something like that. It's so many times He will, just to show you that, hey, I love you no matter what. I'm here for you. I care about the smallest things that you're going through. It doesn't matter. Like if you're, if it's big or small, I care. I want you dependent on me for everything. And He cares about everything about us, everything. I mean, the Bible says He knows how many hairs are on our head. So if He cares about that, why would He not care about everything else in your life? I have a lot of people that'll say to me, oh, well, I don't want to bother God with that about praying about it. And I'm like, He wants you to come to Him.
Well, sure, because just the same way that we want our kids to come to us if they have, some little thing, we want to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the difference with God is He knows about it, but it's just Him. It's just us saying to Him, "Okay, Dad, here we are. We're asking you for this."
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just thinking too, like as a parent, when we know our kids are dealing with something and then they don't tell us, and we're sitting here waiting for them to tell us.
Yes, yes.
And that's how it is with Him. He knows anyway.
Yeah, it's like, come on, come talk to me.
Yeah, He knows when we're having a bad day and when we're angry and pouting or whatever.
Right, that's right.
Yeah,
He absolutely does.
So you've really how did you work through the forgiveness part? A lot of people have trouble with that part.
Yeah. When I was younger, when my dad, I was really too young to understand that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I didn't have like a hatred. And then the other with the guy that murdered my nieces, again, I didn't never have to, it was like God almost instantly gave me that because I was worried about his salvation. And maybe that was my ignorance of being 18 years old. I don't know, but that's like, I didn't really have to get through that part of it. I probably had to get through the anger of them being gone, that kind of stuff, the baby's not growing up, and, or like what my sister had to go through, I mean, because, man,
You could have,
she's a powerhouse, you
well, you
know.
could have easily let anger just, anger and that could have really taken hold of the
Yes.
whole family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so did your whole family embrace the forgiveness part?
Um, honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I'm not sure
Well,
on
it's
that.
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was 18, I was in my own little, my own little world of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, of trying to survive and go from there. I kind of poured myself. I had my two nephews. I was really, really close to them, so I poured myself into them, and took them on all my trips and did all their, did all kind of fun stuff with them growing up. So um, later in life, I had something that happened. I'm not going to go into it, but I had something where I did really learn, like I really did have some anger, like, and I got to the point I hated somebody, and and it is in my book, but I'm not going to talk about it today. But it through that anger, through that hatred that I had, that was a step by step. That was the Holy Spirit going, you know what? I gave you that emotion of hatred, but not to stay in it. I gave you that emotion so that you could heal through it, so that you could learn to forgive through it. And so and that's what I would do, is because I just, I got saved when I was young. I got baptized when I was 6, and I've really had a walk with the Lord pretty much my whole life. I mean, I think you would have to go through what I've been through. I don't think I had an option. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
because I had so many, so many times, like, even if I even thought that I was going to do something, I'd be like, no, I want to see my dad again. I don't want to do anything that's going to hinder me seeing my dad again, or my nieces, or whatever. And so and now even my mom. But um so when I was younger, a lot of times I didn't let things take root because I wanted so hard to keep that purity in that relationship, and that's kind of probably what got me through this other part. Was my mom was had to do with something with my mom, and her last days of her life. And so I went through this hatred, and I would pray and I would say, God, please forgive me. That's not who I am. Like, I don't hate like this. This is not me. So please forgive me, and please help me to love this person again. Please help me to forgive this person. And so he did. Like, at first it came through the point that I could finally pray because my mom wanted that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I knew my mom would want me to pray for this person. And this person was so important to her, and she loved him so much. And then it got to the point where it was me, and I could pray for them and love them, and, and forgive them. Um, so that's how I did it. It was just through prayer. It was a lot of prayer, like a lot of praying, a lot of asking for forgiveness because I didn't want to feel hatred in my heart. Hatred is so evil and so bitter, and it destroys you. And so
Oh,
if you stay in
yeah.
yeah, if you stay in it, it'll destroy you. And that's not God's purpose for us. It's not to live in that. Our God's purpose is for us to live in love and to show people compassion, and to be there and to show them who He is.
Exactly. Yeah. And if we're living in unforgiveness, we end up focusing on that person.
Yeah.
We don't, that person doesn't know anything about what's going on, but we end up focusing on the person we don't want to forgive.
Right.
It almost becomes an idol where we're not focusing on God, we're focusing on the person we don't like,
Right.
you know.
That's right.
So just to be able to forgive them and pray for them, and then we can really release them back to Him.
Right. Right. And that's where I got it. It probably took me a year to get there because it was pretty bad for me, but I did.
Process. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be a process for sure. Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks so much for sharing, Tricia. Was there anything that you could say to encourage, like just a final anything
I
you want to
mean,
say?
yeah, like no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're going through, whether it's big or small, it doesn't matter. It could be, something that you might think is small, but it's still affecting you, or it could be something major like what I've been through. And these are just a few of the things I've been through. We didn't cover all of them because there's too many. That's the reason I wrote a book about it. But is just lean on the Lord, like just totally, let him wrap his arms of love around you. Just let him feel you, and get in your word, pray. Even when you can't pray, just cry and let him, just give it to him. Just say, I have no words for you, God, but here I am, and just be open to him.
Yeah.
And because he wants to be there for you. He cares about every detail of your life. He cares about everything. And so he wants to be there. He wants to encourage you. He wants to show you who he is. And he's awesome. I mean, I'm going to say this one too. I feel like so many people I talked to growing up, they may not have a great relationship with their dad. And so they vision, that's who they vision God is. They see him as this man who's like, overpowering, mean, ready to get them, whatever they've been taught, over how they, and that's not who he is. He loves you. I mean, he obviously is going to discipline us sometimes, like we do as parents. Like, if my
That's how he loves
3-year-old's
us.
yeah, if my 3-year-old's playing with a knife, I don't want her playing with a knife that's going to hurt her. Those disciplines are not for him; they're for us. So when he gives us stuff in his word and says, don't do this, don't do that, it's not for him; it's for us. It's to protect us. It's to keep us protected, so that we're not going through hurts and things that we shouldn't go through.
Yeah.
And so, I just think it's important for people to realize he is a God of love. Like, he cares for you, he loves you, and he wants to be there for you. So
That's really good, Tricia. That's the message that we need to hear, that God is there for us,
yeah,
and he does love. Yeah.
yes,
So I would
yes.
really encourage the people that are listening today to just to recognize that God is there, and he is your father, and he already loves you. So
Right. It
you
does.
are loved. So yeah, it's a great
Yes.
message. Thanks so
Yes.
much for sharing today, Tricia.
Do you mind if I share my book? Is that okay? Can I
Oh,
share it?
yeah.
Yeah, just this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see it. It's
Yeah.
Through the Fire, and it's available on Amazon, or Barnes and Noble, Target, anywhere online. So, and it's just about my life. I just have my testimony in there. So there's other things we did not go through today. So, because you could definitely, and it's about God. Like, my book's about the Lord and what He's brought me through. So, thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much for having me on.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much, Tricia.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Tricia, for joining us here today. Your story is incredible, and I know that people have been inspired and encouraged. So thank you. And for the people who are new to this channel, I hope that you'll subscribe and share with your friends. Be blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Thanks again, Tricia. Bye-bye for now. Talk to you later.